We require employees who are more collaborative. My name is Jenna. I'm 34, and I've served as a project coordinator at Redline Dynamics in Seattle for 5 years. For 5 years, I've managed client budgets, met deadlines, and remained silent. When Gavin made his comments, he was my manager and believed that entitled him to certain privileges. The company was expanding into Las Vegas, new territory, fresh clients, new possibilities. I had hoped for a promotion, perhaps a team lead role on the project. Instead, Gavin summoned me to his office one Tuesday morning to discuss a business trip. "Just you and me," he said, reclining in his chair. "We'll need to stay overnight, assess the market, and meet potential clients." He flashed the smile I'd come to despise. "Hotels are booked tight with the company budget, so we'll have to share a room," he added. I stared at him, recalling 5 years of his lingering glances, comments about my attire, and his excuses to stand too close during meetings. I had redirected every conversation, maintained professionalism, and told myself it wasn't worth causing a stir, but this was different. "That's not going to happen," I said. His smile faded. "Excuse me?" he asked. "No, I'm not sharing a hotel room with you." He leaned forward, his voice dropping. "Jenna, I think you're misunderstanding the assignment's nature. This is business, nothing more. We can get separate rooms. The budget doesn't allow for that." "Then I'm not going," I replied. We locked eyes across his desk, and I could see him processing this, calculating his next move. In 5 years, I had never outright refused him anything. I had deflected, sure, but never said a flat no. "I see," he finally said. "Well, I suppose I'll have to reconsider your role on this project." I nodded and walked out, my hands shaking but my face neutral. I returned to my desk, attempting to focus on the quarterly reports. But I knew what was coming. The thing about men like Gavin is they don't handle rejection well, especially when it comes from women they think they possess. I had worked for him long enough to realize he'd find a way to make me pay for embarrassing him. I just didn't expect it to happen so quickly. 2 days later, I received a call from Human Resources. I had started at Redline Dynamics right after graduate school with a master's degree in business administration, student loans piling up, and a desperate need for a stable paycheck. The company managed logistics coordination for manufacturing. Firms across the Pacific Northwest. Not glamorous, but steady. Gavin hired me himself. He was the department head then and charming during the interview process, inquiring about my career aspirations and 5-year plan, making me feel like he saw potential in me. For the first year, everything was professional. He was a good boss, really, assigning me challenging projects and supporting me when clients turned difficult. But the comments began to accumulate gradually. Little things like, "You look nice today, Jenna. That color really highlights your eyes." I convinced myself it was harmless office banter. My dad had always said that women in business needed thick skin. By year 3, it escalated. He would find reasons to touch my shoulder during meetings, stand too close while reviewing documents, and ask about my dating life or weekend plans. When I got engaged to my boyfriend David, Gavin's demeanor changed. He became cold and critical, and my performance reviews suffered. The engagement didn't last. David and I broke up after 2 years, and somehow Gavin found out before I told anyone at work. His mood improved significantly. The compliments returned, and he started inviting me to lunch for business discussions. Just the two of us. I developed strategies to manage the situation. Never worked late when he was still in the office, always kept my door open during one-on-one meetings, and brought coffee from home instead of using the break room where he liked to corner people. I thought I was handling it well. My coworkers noticed but said nothing. Patricia from accounting would give me sympathetic looks during staff meetings, and Jake from IT would position himself between Gavin and me at company events, but nobody spoke openly about it. That's how things work in small companies. Everyone knows, but no one wants to be the one to speak up. I should have reported him years ago, but I needed the job, and Gavin was well liked by upper management. He brought in clients, met his targets, and played golf with the company president. I was replaceable, but he was not. The Vegas assignment was his boldest move yet. No witnesses, no office colleagues, just him and me in a hotel room 300 miles from home. When I refused, I saw a change in his expression. The mask slipped for just a moment, and I saw how he truly viewed me, not as an employee or a professional, but as something he had been patiently trying to acquire. He had been building toward this moment for months, maybe years, and I had just forced his hand. Thursday morning at 11:15 a.m., Sandra from Human Resources called my extension. "Jenna, could you come down to conference room B? We need to discuss your employment status." My stomach dropped, but I kept my voice steady. "I'll be right there." I saved my work, grabbed a notepad, and walked downstairs. Sandra was waiting, with Gavin and someone I didn't recognize, a man in an expensive suit with a briefcase. "Please sit down," Sandra said, her voice careful and rehearsed. "This is Robert Chen from our legal department." I sat, keeping my hands folded and my expression neutral. "Jenna," Sandra continued, "we've received reports about interpersonal conflicts affecting your work performance, specifically issues with collaborative teamwork and responsiveness to management directives." I looked at Gavin. He was staring at his hands, playing the reluctant manager forced to discipline a difficult employee. "I see," I said. "Could you be more specific about these reports?" The lawyer opened his briefcase and pulled out a folder. "Mr. Reed has documented several instances of insubordination and unprofessional behavior, refusing work assignments, challenging management decisions, creating a hostile work environment." "Hostile work environment?" I repeated. "Yes," Sandra said. "We take these matters very seriously. After careful consideration, we've decided to terminate your employment effective immediately." I sat there for a moment, processing 5 years of clean performance reviews, 5 years of meeting deadlines, managing difficult clients, covering for coworkers, and now I was the problem. "Your attitude problem is affecting the workplace," Gavin said, finally looking up. "We need employees who are more cooperative." Cooperative. There it was. "I understand," I said. "May I ask about severance?" The lawyer slid a document across the table. 2 weeks pay contingent on signing this. Non-disclosure agreement? Standard practice. I scanned the document. Legal language about not disparaging the company, not discussing the circumstances of my termination, not pursuing legal action. They wanted my silence. "I'll need to review this with my own attorney," I said. Gavin's jaw tightened. "That's your right, of course, but the offer expires at the close of business today." I nodded, stood up, and shook hands with Sandra. "Thank you for the opportunity to work here. I've learned a lot." I walked back to my desk, packed my personal items into a cardboard box, and left the building. I didn't say goodbye to anyone, didn't make a scene, just walked out with my dignity intact. But sitting in my car in the parking lot, I felt something I hadn't felt in years. Not defeat, not humiliation, but clarity. Gavin thought he had won, thought he had silenced me and eliminated a problem employee who wouldn't comply. He had no idea what he had actually done. He had liberated me from needing this job, and that changed everything. I drove home, made myself coffee, then sat at my kitchen table and started planning. I didn't sign their non-disclosure agreement. Instead, I called David's sister Lauren, who graduated from law school 2 years earlier and worked for a firm downtown. She agreed to meet me for coffee Saturday morning. "They're trying to buy your silence," she said after reading the document. 2 weeks severance for 5 years of employment? That's insulting. What are my options? You could file a complaint with the Equal Employment Opportunity Commission, sexual harassment, retaliation, wrongful termination, but you'd need documentation. Do you have anything in writing? I pulled out my phone and showed her the text. Messages. 3 months' worth of after-hours communications from Gavin, invitations to dinner, comments about my appearance, increasingly bold suggestions about opportunities for advancement. Lauren's eyebrows raised. This is good. What about the Vegas trip? Any record of that conversation? I recorded it. She stared at me. You recorded your boss propositioning you? I started recording all our private meetings after he cornered me in the break room last month. I had a feeling something like this might happen. Lauren leaned back in her chair. Jenna, this is a solid case, but you need to know what you're getting into. Employment lawsuits can take years, and Redline Dynamics has money for good lawyers. I spent the weekend contemplating it. Monday morning, I called the EEOC and filed a formal complaint. They scheduled an interview for the following week. That's when Gavin made his biggest mistake. Tuesday afternoon, my phone rang from an unknown number. Jenna, this is Robert Chen from Redline Dynamics. I understand you've been in contact with outside legal counsel regarding your termination. That's correct. I want to be very clear about something. The non-disclosure agreement you refused to sign contained important protections for both parties. Without those protections, we may be forced to take a more aggressive stance regarding your employment termination. Meaning what exactly? Meaning we have documentation of performance issues dating back 2 years, missed deadlines, client complaints, insubordination. If this matter proceeds to litigation, we'll be compelled to present evidence that your termination was entirely justified and had nothing to do with any alleged harassment. I felt my stomach clench. Are you threatening me? I'm explaining the legal realities of your situation. The offer stands until the end of business today. 2 weeks severance, mutual non-disclosure, clean separation. After today, any settlement discussions would necessarily be less favorable. He hung up before I could respond. I called Lauren immediately. They're threatening to fabricate performance issues if I don't drop the complaint. They can try, she said, but you have 5 years of performance reviews, right? Clean record up until this year? Gavin gave me 2 negative reviews after I started refusing his invitations. When exactly did those negative reviews start? I pulled up my email archives. March and June, right after I told him I wasn't interested in having dinner with him. Perfect. That's textbook retaliation. The timing alone proves your case. But when I went to my email the next morning, something was off. My work account had been deactivated, which was expected, but my personal emails from colleagues were gone. Messages I'd forwarded to my personal account, backup copies of documents, performance reviews. I'd saved everything related to Redline Dynamics had vanished. I called my internet provider. There was a legal request for data removal, the technician informed me. Court order. We had to comply. What court order? You'd need to contact the requesting party for details. I called Lauren in a panic. They've deleted everything. All my evidence. That's not possible. You can't just delete someone's personal emails. They did it. Somehow, they did it. Lauren was quiet for a long moment. Jenna, who exactly are we dealing with here? How big is this company? I looked up Redline Dynamics' corporate structure online, and what I found made my blood run cold. Not just a logistics company, but a subsidiary of a much larger defense contractor with government connections and military contracts. The kind of company that probably had lawyers who knew exactly how to make problems disappear. I spent 3 days in my apartment feeling defeated. Every avenue seemed blocked. My evidence was gone, my EEOC complaint looked weak without documentation, and Redline's lawyers had made it clear they'd fight dirty. But Wednesday evening, something unexpected happened. My doorbell rang. Patricia from accounting stood on my doorstep, looking nervous. "I hope you don't mind me coming by," she said. "I got your address from the employee directory before they updated it." I invited her in, made coffee, and waited for her to speak. "I heard what happened," she said finally. "About the Vegas trip, about your termination. I wanted you to know you're not the first." My coffee cup stopped halfway to my lips. "What do you mean?" 3 years ago, there was another woman, Kelly Morrison. She worked in client relations. The same thing happened to her. Gavin made advances, she refused, and suddenly she was terminated for performance issues. What happened to her? She tried to fight it, filed complaints, hired a lawyer. The company buried her in legal motions until she ran out of money. She eventually took a settlement just to make it stop. Patricia reached into her purse and pulled out a flash drive. She kept copies of everything, every email, every performance review, every interaction with Gavin. When she heard through mutual friends what happened to you, she wanted you to have this. I stared at the flash drive. Why didn't she use this during her own case? She tried, but her lawyer said it wasn't enough without other witnesses. One woman's word against a department head, but 2 women. That's a pattern. Patricia leaned forward. There's something else. I've been keeping records too. Every time I've seen Gavin behave inappropriately, every conversation I've overheard. I never knew what to do with the information, but I couldn't just ignore what was happening. She handed me a manila folder. 5 years of documentation, dates, times, witnesses. I knew someone would eventually have the courage to speak up. I opened the folder and found pages of handwritten notes detailing Gavin's behavior toward female employees. Times he'd made inappropriate comments during meetings, instances where he'd retaliated against women who rebuffed his advances. "Patricia, why are you doing this?" She was quiet for a moment. "Because I have a daughter. She's 22, just starting her career. I don't want her to go through what you and Kelly went through, what I went through when I was younger." "Gavin harassed you too?" "Different time, different company, but the same story. I was young, Needed the job, couldn't afford to fight back. I've regretted my silence every day for 20 years. That night, I called Kelly Morrison. Patricia had given me her number. I wondered if someone would eventually reach out. When I heard Gavin was still there, still in management, I knew it was only a matter of time before he tried this again. Will you help me? I've been waiting for someone to ask. My settlement included a non-disclosure clause, but it only applies to my own case. If you file a new complaint and I'm called as a witness, I can testify about patterns of behavior. What? About retaliation? Kelly laughed, but there was no humor in it. They already destroyed my career once. What else can they do to me? The next morning, I called Lauren with the new evidence. This time, her voice was different, confident. This changes everything, she said. Multiple victims, documented patterns, retaliation. They can delete your emails, but they can't make witnesses disappear. What's our next move? We file an amended complaint and we go public. Lauren introduced me to her firm's senior partner, a woman named Margaret Walsh who specialized in employment law. Margaret had silver hair and steel in her voice, the kind of lawyer corporations actually feared. I've seen companies like Redline before, she told me during our first meeting. Defense contractors with government connections think they're untouchable, but sexual harassment law doesn't care about your security clearance. We developed a strategy. First, file an amended EEOC complaint with Kelly's and Patricia's evidence. Second, reach out to local media. Margaret had contacts at the Seattle Times who covered workplace issues. Third, identify other potential victims through social media and professional networks. The key is momentum, Margaret explained. Once the first story breaks, other women will come forward. They always do, but we needed to move carefully. Redline had already demonstrated their willingness to play dirty, and we couldn't afford to give them ammunition. I spent the following week reaching out to former Redline employees through LinkedIn, carefully worded messages asking about their experiences with management and whether they'd be willing to share their stories confidentially. The responses were revealing. 7 women over 6 years had left the company under circumstances involving Gavin. Not all were harassment cases, but several involved retaliation for rejecting his advances or reporting his behavior. One woman, Jessica Chen, had been fired after complaining about Gavin to Human Resources. Another, Stephanie Brooks, had been demoted and eventually forced out after refusing to attend client dinners, where Gavin consistently made inappropriate comments. Most telling was a response from Sarah Williams, who had worked as Gavin's assistant for 2 years. She had never filed complaints because she needed the job to support her disabled mother, but she documented everything in a personal journal. I kept detailed records because I knew someday someone would need proof, she wrote. I just didn't have the financial stability to be that someone myself. By Friday, we had statements from 9 women spanning 6 years. Margaret filed the amended complaint Monday morning. Tuesday, the Seattle Times published their investigation. The headline read, "Defense contractor faces multiple harassment allegations." The story laid out the pattern of behavior, the company's responses, and the broader implications for workplace culture in the defense industry. Redline's stock price dropped 12% by market close. Wednesday morning, my phone rang. Robert Chen again. Miss Whitmore, I think we may have been hasty in our previous communications. My client is prepared to discuss a reasonable settlement that addresses your concerns. What kind of settlement? Full salary compensation for 12 months, positive, references, and a contribution to a women's workplace advocacy organization of your choosing in exchange for standard non-disclosure terms. What about the other women? That would need to be discussed separately. I hung up and called Margaret. They're trying to isolate me from the group. Classic divide and conquer. They want to silence you before more women come forward. How many calls have you gotten from reporters? 15 since yesterday. Good. The pressure is working. Don't take any interviews yet, but let them know you're represented by counsel and considering all options. Thursday brought another development. The Department of Defense announced they were reviewing Redline's government contracts in light of the harassment allegations. For a company that derived 60% of its revenue from federal contracts, this was devastating. Friday afternoon, Margaret called with news. Redline's board of directors held an emergency meeting. Gavin Reed has been terminated effective immediately. They've also agreed to establish a $10 million fund for workplace harassment prevention and victim compensation. What about the other women? They'll all be offered settlements based on their individual circumstances, and the company has agreed to independent oversight of their human resources practices for the next 5 years. I sat in my kitchen, staring out the window. 2 weeks ago, I had been terminated for refusing to share a hotel room with my boss. Now, he was the one out of a job. But there was still one more call I needed to make. Saturday evening at 7:30 p.m., I sat at my kitchen table with a glass of wine and my phone. I'd been contemplating this call for weeks, not because I desired revenge exactly, but because there was someone who deserved to know the truth. Cynthia Reed answered on the third ring. Hello? Ms. Reed, this is Jenna Whitmore. I used to work for your husband at Redline Dynamics. Silence. Then I heard about the news stories. I imagine you did. I'm calling because I thought you should. Know that this wasn't just about work. The harassment wasn't just professional misconduct. What do you mean? I took a deep breath. He told me several times that his marriage was ending, that he was planning to leave you. He said you didn't understand him, that you'd grown apart. More silence. He used that as justification for pursuing other women. How many? At least 9. That we've documented. Probably more. Cynthia was quiet for a long time. When she spoke again, her voice was different, harder. Thank you for calling. I need to ask you something. Do you have any evidence of him discussing our marriage with you or the other women? Yes, I have text messages, voice recordings, and several of the other women received similar communications. Would you be willing to share those with my attorney? Of course. Good, because I filed for separation this morning, and now I'm filing for divorce on grounds of adultery and emotional abuse. 3 months later, I started my new job at Brightcrest Analytics, a mid-sized consulting firm in downtown Seattle. The salary was better, the benefits were better, and I had a female CEO who had specifically recruited me after reading about the Redline case. The settlement money allowed me to take my time finding the right position. I turned down several offers from larger companies that felt too much like my old job. I wanted something different, somewhere I could rebuild. My career on my own terms. Gavin's divorce was finalized in February. Cynthia got the house, half of his retirement fund, and full custody of their teenage daughter. The recordings I provided helped establish a pattern of deception and emotional manipulation that extended far beyond his workplace behavior. He moved to Phoenix and took a job with a small construction company. No management responsibilities, no female subordinates. His new employer had done their homework. Kelly Morrison reached out last month to tell me she'd been hired by a nonprofit that advocates for workplace harassment victims. She was using her settlement money to fund their legal assistance program. Patricia got promoted to accounting manager at Redline after Gavin's departure. The new department head was a woman brought in specifically to rebuild the company culture. I kept the flash drive Patricia had given me. Sometimes, I would look at it and remember how alone I felt that Tuesday morning when Human Resources called me downstairs. I had thought I was fighting by myself against an entire system designed to protect men like Gavin, but I wasn't alone. None of us were. The women who came before me had been documenting, recording, and waiting for someone to take the first step. When I finally spoke up, they were ready. Sometimes justice takes time, but it's worth waiting for.